We had money in the bank, the payroll was getting processed. We were able to purchase some small assets like vehicles, we were able to do all of these things that were necessary, but we were just something wasn't right.
All right, welcome to the first ever episode of the Beat the Benchmark podcast with our first guest here, Madison Lukeman. Madison, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. I'm sitting at home and enjoying the summertime here in Michigan.
Yeah, it looks beautiful. I appreciate that. I also love to work outside, so love that you're doing this outside. Why don't you tell myself and our audience a little bit more about who you are and what your company is and what you guys do?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Madison Lukeman, my husband, Joe Lukeman, and I own Lukeman Property Management as well as Lukeman Group. So we have a property management company as well as a real estate sales company. We operate in the greater Kalamazoo, Michigan area. My husband started our property management company in 2011, and that was primarily a function of necessity due to his own investment properties that he had collected at that point and his family and friends who had also invested in the Kalamazoo area, primarily after the housing market crash. Um, I joined the company specifically in 2014. My background is property management through my family. My family still owns rental property, and my mother also owns a business that manages housing choice vouchers for the state of Michigan. Joe and I are both licensed realtors as well, and Joe is the broker for our real estate sales company.
Okay, so you guys have some pretty good real estate lineage,
Yes.
not first generation real estate people.
No, not by any means.
Okay. What's the family history there? I mean, you mentioned your mom, she owns businesses, manage housing choice vouchers, Section 8. Like what are some things that you've picked up from just growing up in this? Like, did you maybe another way to say that or a question to ask around that is was that once you were an adult, your family was in that, or did you kind of grow up in real estate?
So I grew up in real estate. My dad is a licensed contractor, so he was consistently picking up properties, keeping them for rentals, flipping them. We would also do that in our own family home. He would flip our family home, so always moving, always like upgrading, kind of climbing that ladder, if you will. And my mother worked actually for Apple for a really long time and then chose to go into self-employment and found an opportunity to contract with the state of Michigan for housing choice vouchers. So, by the age of 10, I was stuffing envelopes and putting stamps on letters to be mailed out to participants and things like that. I went through college and decided that I wanted to move out to Colorado to Winter Park Ski Resort. Did
Nice.
Worked in their property management division there at the resort, and eventually wanted to venture back home to Michigan. And that's ultimately how Joe and I met, was in real estate. Joe's lineage goes back to his dad owning a good handful of rental properties as well. And Joe has such a personality to be an entrepreneur that he started his own business and has really taken to being his own boss and building a company.
Okay, so tell me about Lukeman Group. What's your portfolio like today? How long did it take to build it up? Maybe give me the story arc, highs and lows, just overall of the Lukeman Group.
So we have today we have 623 units, all concentrated in the greater Kalamazoo area. This is primarily made up of single family homes and small multifamily buildings, with our largest building under management being 24 units.
Okay.
How that breaks down client wise is we have about 145 owners that we work with. That would also include the family and friends that I refer to. Um, we really started organically building in 2011 is when Joe started the business, and that started with about 75 units. In 2012, we took on several clients from another local property management company that came over, just not pleased with the management they were receiving, made connections with Joe. one of those clients ended up purchasing multiple properties at that time to get their portfolio to be about 110 units. So at that point, the company was ranging at about 250 units or so. Um, that 110 immediately doubled the business size wise. So it became increasingly burdensome to have a concentration of one client for those 110. Um, we, we really appreciate that unit count allowed us to scale and grow our business and our reputation in town. And I think that was kind of like the launch of us, kind of that snowball was getting the 250, and then it continued to snowball from there and get bigger.
What's the story from the 250 to the 623? Is it acquisitions? Is it, picking up a few dozen a year? How did that proliferate?
Yeah, so this year we actually, inside of that to 623, we have onboarded 176 units. So ultimately we went from 250 to about 450 very organically. We referrals, we would have listings or buyers that would come into our company, primarily seeing our website. We still are very tailored towards being a company that is a property management company that provides all of the services for the asset. So the real estate sales arm, as well as the full service asset management from maintenance to management. And then we have clients that offboarded as well. Trying to retain the successful properties under management has always been a key to our keeping doors. Was like, this is a successful asset. You're looking to manage, you're looking to exit it. Who can we sell it to in order to keep it under management? So we grew to about 450 doors in that time. And again, all very organically. And adding in the 176 doors this year is really what has taken us up over 600.
So that's 176 net, or just 176 added with some churn built, as well,
Yep. So we've had some churn built
but
into
fairly
there.
low.
It's been pretty low churn from my understanding of, other market churn rates. So our churn has been fairly low for
Okay.
the company.
Well, let's just point that out. I mean, 176 units added, and we're recording this in late July. You're on pace for over 300. And for a company of your size, that is an incredible growth rate. Some of our biggest clients, or some of our bigger clients, I'm thinking here about the 1,000 plus, 1,200 plus, their goals for the year are around 300, 300, 350. Maybe if you're even bigger, you're like 400 or 500. But at 623, 300 new doors is a big deal. So if you would just real quickly, like, what's working as far as unit ad goes?
I would say our general onboarding services are immediate. As soon as we get any type of lead, I am the one to reach out to them immediately. And that's phone call, email, whatever, however they've contacted our office, it is immediate contact. I've got, blanket, introductory email templates, marketing, anything that can capture that. And then it is also just the follow-up. Like I think that in our market specifically, there is a lack of maybe full management service. So we've got the in-house maintenance piece that we have had for ever, from the inception of the company, as well as just the ability to get things done. I don't, we have a lot of city compliance here in Kalamazoo that's required. We're experts in that. We're experts in the real estate market as well. So I think just having these knowledgeable conversations with those clients that inquire is really what sets us apart.
Okay, so I'm hearing three things there. Being the company, and you specifically being the person who's on it with communication. It's fast, it's immediate, you're consistent with your follow-up. So you're just nailing the communication piece. That's one. The connection to the real estate sales piece of your business, it sounds like, is another one. Just knowing the market, knowing the people, having the network, and being able to be, I love what you said, like full service, in-house maintenance combined with property management, combined with real estate sales. means you can hit the full life cycle of a unit for an owner, and that raises the bar. And then the last one, this is becoming increasingly common to me amongst, or the pattern is becoming increasingly apparent to me as I talk to clients and just PMs across the country. The PMs who are doing this well in highly regulated environments are being very successful. So just an interesting point here.
Yes.
A lot of people run from regulation. I don't want to operate in a highly regulatory environment. I kind of have the opposite take. That's where the value is. That's where you can demonstrate the value. That's where self-management is most difficult. I think that's where the opportunity is. I think about San Francisco, Los Angeles, Portland, Seattle. Like I'm just seeing people kill it in those markets because it's so hard to self-manage, and it's hard for a undisciplined mom and pop operator who's not doing things in a modern way to stay up on all the regulation, and they're losing business because of it. You found the same in Kalamazoo?
I have found the same in Kalamazoo. We have really specific processes around what's called our city correction notice process, and that is that's that municipal piece that so many people are missing. Mom and pop are missing is the ability to step through the process and get something certified for rental and habitability. And we're able to educate. I mean, I think really what Joe and I truly enjoy is educating, whether it is on the quality of the rental, what it needs to be city certified, what it needs to get the rent that the client's looking for. We really just want to like educate and say, hey, this is our experience. This is where we come from. This is what we think. If you can accept that, then this is how the asset can be successful.
Yeah, yeah, that's really good. Okay, and then before we go on, I know that part of your story and a turning point in some places in your story is a fire. Can you just tell
Mhm.
me the story of what that is and how that's what happened and how it affected you guys?
Yeah, so when we doubled in size and we brought on the client that ultimately had 110 units with the company, so highest concentration of units was for one owner. We then had, in the summer of 2024, we had a serial arsonist roll through Kalamazoo.
Wow.
And that arsonist was an unhoused individual. And that individual lit a fire on the back porch of a property next door to what we refer to as 201 Allen, so Allen Boulevard. And so that person, he lit the property next door on fire. And again, these houses are built with no setbacks on the property lines. So that fire jumped into our 4 unit building, which was probably, I think it was like 4,500 square feet in total. So huge structure, 4 beautiful units, highest rent units. And that structure, luckily, all the tenants got out of the property safely. Fire department was there, and it burnt to the ground. It was completely destroyed. At that point in time, our client was ready to offboard. He's like, we gotta, this is detrimental. I am, unable to rebuild this property to what the municipality is going to require it to be. Unfortunately, underinsured situation. And he then started offboarding those 110 units.
Okay.
That was the catalyst of us having to start analyzing how are we going to make up for these 110? Like, what are we going to do? Because he's exiting fast. How do we keep this intact? What is the ramification of this exit? Um, and that's when we really started to like work with Ben and get an idea of the changes we needed to make. And we were also miserable, in working in the business as well. So we said, okay, we're miserable. Now we have these units exiting. We gotta make some changes, blow some stuff up. So
Okay. Okay. So I'm going to put a pin in that, and I'm going
yeah.
to go back a little earlier and talk about kind of the before, and then catch us back up there. So before you had a clear financial picture of the business, before you felt like you had a grasp on what you had, what were the things that felt off, even if you couldn't fully explain why they felt off?
I think for us, the staffing and the structure of the company felt off. Joe and I were doing had too many staff members and were doing far too many tasks on a daily basis. Like I was having to answer the phone too often. Joe was having to do too many site visits for the maintenance side of things. We were just stuck in the day to day of the business. So that was like our gut feeling that it didn't even necessarily correlate to numbers as of yet, because again, we had money in the bank, the payroll was getting processed, we were able to purchase some small assets like vehicles, we were able to do all of these things that were necessary, but we were just something wasn't right.
So even if you couldn't necessarily point to a metric, point to a number and say, here's the problem, there was a feeling of this isn't right, making payroll, not losing money, paying taxes, but not a clear, holistic understanding of the performance of the business.
Yes.
Okay, and one of the things that I know you told us early on was that you had a number of units that were consuming 80% of your time. So you had like the classic 80-20 rule going on here. A small percentage are making up a big percentage of how you spend your time. Why did you tolerate that for so long? What was the story you told yourself that made you keep them and not fire them a while back?
I think that we were so focused on what our unit count was.
Ah.
Like to us early on, we were very much like, okay, we just like let's get to 300. Let's get to, we were just like setting these numbers in a wall and saying if we can just get here, like it's going to increase. We can do this. So that was like when I think about like the numbers, we're like, okay, it's always got to be unit count is going to increase revenue and increase make more money and do all these things. And then we kept the units that were consuming 80% of our time also were the units of that 110 that were offboarding because they were so maintenance heavy. They were so maintenance heavy. The tenant base was lower income, maybe moderate income as well. So that generally correlates to the 80, that time being taken. So with that, we were catering to the client because of their unit count, and we were consistently like saying yes to deviating from our management contract or our processes, which then gets us in trouble. Like we've made an exception to the process, and then we can't follow that process because it's not what we're doing for everyone else.
Yeah. So it lowers your staff efficiency and
Yep.
it also lowers your consistency in performance and it lowers your client experience because you're constantly making exceptions. So
Yes.
you're communicating more, things are getting lost or balls are getting dropped and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, that's the catch 22 in my view with door count. It does matter, and chasing it for certain things really matters a lot. I mean, when you're first starting out, yeah, like you said, you got these 110. It doubled your size. It allowed you to have some scale. Now you can start to hire some people. Those first 200 doors really do matter, and you got to kind of do whatever you got to do to get them. And then later down the line, I'm sure you guys are experiencing this now. There's another threshold where I think door count matters a lot for scale. 8, 900, 1,000 doors, where it's like, well, now we have the infrastructure to support some more middle management, perhaps a general manager or a COO or something like that. But for the most part, yeah, you can get really wrapped up in a number and it can lead to some pretty bad business decisions, which it sounds like you're willing to say, yeah, that was us for a season.
That was us, certainly. And I wouldn't say that they were bad business decisions. I think that we didn't know the possibility because we didn't have clarity on our numbers. And that's really what it comes down to, is that we didn't have clarity on how the business was actually performing. So thus we felt like our hands were tied to make any decisions.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So now let's talk through that. So just generally, what happened when you finally saw it? When you got the clarity, the financial clarity from knowing your numbers, from knowing kind of the big six metrics and KPIs of financial performance and property management? Like, what changed for you when you saw it?
Well, we finally had directive is really what happened is we were uh we could see the dashboard and we could see what the industry we could finally measure ourselves against the industry to say, okay, here are the areas that we need to work on. Here's where we're doing well. Uh, and this is where we're going to start. We finally could see that labor specifically for us was an issue. We were spending so much time on labor or time and money on labor. And when I say time on labor, what I mean by that is my time to answer questions or train, like that was the time that it was taking. And again, like this is not onboarding somebody. This is like we are a year and a half into your employment. Why am I
Mhm.
still getting this question?
Yeah.
So it's that's my time. Um, so we specifically looked at direct labor, and that was our first piece of what do we need to do here.
Okay. Okay. So was that the number for you? Like when you got it all and we kind of showed it all and the financial model made sense. It was like, all
Mhm.
right, direct labor, that's the issue. And then what? You just started to attack it?
Yeah, we did. So we looked at DLER as well as revenue per unit. So we because we were exiting 110 units, we knew we were going to have to make up revenue somewhere. Like we knew we were going to have to identify places where we could optimize revenue in the unit count that we had, because we knew we weren't going to I shouldn't say we I don't know that we were willing at that point to lean into gaining another 110 or replacing the 110. We wanted to take that break and say, okay, we're going to exit the 110, but how do we optimize what we have before we try to scale up again? And so direct labor, we looked at that, and that at that time it was also combined with our frustration with working in the business. And I recall Joe actually went out to Mark Cunningham's office in Denver, and he went through this like 1 week in Mark's office, and Mark operates primarily on contracted property managers. And Joe came back with that idea. He's like, I think this can work for our business. I think that this is going to help us get out of the day to day. So it was a combination of labor, looking at revenue changes, which are ultimately contract changes, right? And then structural changes, all in the same.
Okay. So what labor model do you run off of right now? Is it pure portfolio?
It is portfolio, but we have maintained our maintenance division as
Yeah.
centralized.
Okay.
So I'm not
So
exactly sure if we're still calling that portfolio in the industry, but
I would. I mean, when you have in-house and that's separated, but the manager does everything else, I would still
yeah,
call that, I would just call that portfolio with in-house maintenance,
yes, yeah,
right? It would probably be classified as hybrid if you didn't have in-house, but you had maintenance coordinators, because
hmm
then you've got portfolio managers doing most of the things, but one element, taken away for maintenance coordination. Obviously, another common one is like leasing and renewals. If you take that away and hire someone specific for that, now you're in a pretty hybrid model. What
yeah.
have what have been the advantages to you? You went from so all the rage right now is like switching from departmental to hybrid or portfolio to hybrid, but you guys went from departmental, which has been a long been a favorite for property managers, over to portfolio. What sort of changes have you noticed in that transition from a customer standpoint?
Yeah, so we immediately identified that our clients are receiving the most communication that they've ever received. So because we have divided our, 145 owners amongst five property managers, they are receiving the most communication related to their portfolios that they've ever received from us. And previously, it was just Joe and I communicating with our clients because we felt like we were their point of contact. This is who they knew. We were the experts. And, that's who they wanted to hear from, was us. And it turns out really what they just want to hear is from one dedicated person, and they want to hear all the things.
Doesn't
So
have to be you, but it has
it
to be one
doesn't have to
person.
be me. It just has to be somebody with a Lukeman Group logo on the bottom of their email. So, and now our property managers have also developed relationships with that client base as well.
Okay. Okay. So 2025, you go see Mark. You start to move towards this portfolio management structure in the summer. And then you told me, early this year, you did another shift in structure. So what was that shift?
Yes. So we in summer of 24, we hired our first contracted property manager.
Okay.
And that came from the, recommendations from Mark Cunningham's office. We supported that property manager while he onboarded his more clients. So our directive to him was like, hey, you are responsible to bring in more clients, because
Okay.
again, we're looking to replace these 110 units. So his responsibility was to bring in new clients, which he did. And then when we saw that model working with this one property manager, is when in January of 2026, just this year, we said we're going to take the clients that we have that are existing and then divide them up amongst dedicated property managers. So we
Okay.
we kind of lived in this limbo while we watched the contracted property manager make it work. It was like a test sample for
Oh
us.
yeah.
And throughout like quarter 4 of 2025, we were working with Ben in our coaching calls to determine what is it that we could afford to hire for our property managers as employees. And if we divide these units up, if we are receiving more labor efficiency from these property managers, what staff do we potentially need to lay off? And so that planning took place in quarter 4 of 25 and launched in January of 26. So we hired 2 property managers. We laid off, I think, a total of 3 other staff that, again, were being used in departmental style that just became unnecessary because of that change.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense. And then how did you and Ben and Joe kind of go through that decision making progress or process? Was there a like financial model, labor model? Was it a little bit more art and feel or a little bit more science and numbers to figure out how to make all of that work? Because that's a big shift.
It was a big shift, and really I would say it was more numbers. We had a feeling of what we needed to pay a professional property manager in our labor market. So we started with that. We said, okay, we think we're going to have to pay this amount to receive a quality property manager, and they're going to need health insurance, and they're going to need mileage, all of these things. So we then put that into, these beautiful spreadsheets that Ben creates for us, and said, how many are we going to need to manage how many properties? So right now, we have 2 property managers of the 5 that are managing just about 175 doors each. And then we have another property manager who's at probably 80 units. And then we had the 176 doors that came in as well, which is divided amongst 2 others. So our property managers are not evenly dispersed at this point in time, primarily because those 176 doors came in, and those 2 property managers are going to be retiring. So now I have
Okay.
to disperse the 176. I have to do this kind of like shift and model again in units as well. So um, kind of getting into the weeds on that, but that was how we started, was with numbers, was with labor numbers and what that was going to do. But then peeling off the employees that we're laying off obviously opens up opportunity as well.
Yeah. So what you're describing is an incredibly relatable experience for property managers. I used to run a property management company. We had usually between 1,300 and 1,400 doors. We were also portfolio style. We started to go hybrid towards the end of my tenure there. And the problem is you're always balancing and rebalancing portfolios. So
Yes.
you've got, you know this. You have a bunch of units come in, you have a bunch of units go out, you have a property manager retire, you have to let somebody go, you hire two new property managers. And so it's just this constant game of shuffling portfolios while trying to minimize portfolio transfer, like property transfer from one portfolio to another, but having your head straight on how do I optimally service all of these units? How do I do so in a way that produces maximal results for owners and tenants and drives the highest labor efficiency that I can for my business? Um, like other than communication, that's basically the game of running a property management company.
Yes.
As you know, it's like
Yeah.
maximize DLER while maximize owner and tenant experience. And it's pretty
Mhm.
hard, right?
It is. It's very challenging. I watch DLER every month. Every single month, I'm like, okay, what's it going to be this month when we close it out? And but there's also that that line of like, okay, I would almost rather be overstaffed just by a little bit to make sure that
Yes.
if I have to move somebody around, someone has a medical emergency, whatever that is, I'd rather have trained individuals. So like our DLER, I think will always be on the higher end, but it's intentional. And I think that it's also important to identify like making that labor efficient. So who needs what in order to be more efficient, or what does the company need? And how can we, utilize the staff to make sure that the company, or do we need to again, like, do we need to review our lease contract? What forms do we need? What are these like hiccups that we need? And then we can optimize the labor that we have in order to make our company better too.
Yeah. And then another point there, you just brought it up. I would summarize it this way. Um, higher DLER, like the highest DLER you could theoretically get is usually not the best business decision. You
Hmm.
don't want to be as high as you could possibly be because then, somebody walks in, hey, I've got 50 class A doors. Well, you don't have anybody who can manage those doors.
Yep.
So you have to have some play. There has to be some room in your portfolio to absorb, as you know, because you guys are in a pretty serious growth season right now. And with no signs of slowing down, you have to stay ahead of that. You have to hire ahead of that. You have to train ahead of that. And so those are unique challenges. I know you had a number of goals when you started working with us, but there were two primary ones. Once you got clarity on your numbers, it's how can I drive profitability and how can I get out of the day to day. So how would you assess where you are on those things relative to when we started working together from a profitability standpoint and from a, you know, quality of life out of the day to day operations standpoint as well?
As far as quality of life, significantly better. Change the the change to our structure has allowed us to uh, get out of the day to day. Now, again, like we are still assisting and helping and advising, which is what I really enjoy. I enjoy someone coming to me with an issue that, you know, they can't resolve, and I, help them with that. I love the advisement. I managed to move a phone off of my desk. I no longer have a desk phone to like
Oh,
answer
nice.
the phone. I can't answer the phone anymore, which is great. Um, as far as and then Joe's goal this year specifically was to work in the business just part-time, and I think, we're more than halfway through the year. He has done an exceptional job at doing that and just not having to be in the office every single day or out in the field every day. So as far as our own like personal goals and getting out of the business, it's going well, and it's primarily due to that structural change. Um, as
Good.
it relates to our income, you know, I guess I would say I'm generally surprised that we're doing so well, and still meeting those goals of not working in the day to day, which is the combination of the two is exceptional to me. I think that the units that we onboarded this year, from January to July, had more revenue benefit than we had anticipated or forecasted for, which again is such a great a great problem to have. That was just such a valuable move to the company, is to bring those in.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. Okay. Well, the summary sentence, I think, to what you just said, and exactly like exactly what we are after at Profit Coach is to help PM entrepreneurs like you build highly profitable, self-managing companies. And you kind of have to see it to believe it as far as those two things being true at the same time. You said, you're like, I'm surprised that we've been able to stay out of the day today and we're making money.
Mhm.
It's possible. And that's part of why I wanted to do this podcast, is to share some of these stories, not necessarily to toot the horn of Profit Coach, but to show people like it is actually possible to have the life you want to have as an entrepreneur, work on the problems that matter to you and that invigorate you and make you excited about work, while also having a highly profitable company that's, mostly driven by, at least from a day-to-day perspective, mostly driven by your employees and not yourself. Um, so you guys have done an awesome job of that, and that takes a lot of work. So congratulations to you. That's not just, oh, Profit Coach like gave me the roadmap and I just did it. No, I mean that took a substantial amount of work. You're not accidentally getting 176 properties in the first 7 months of a year, right? That's the culmination of a long time of consistently being excellent.
Yes, yes. Well, I appreciate that, and I will toot the horn of Profit Coach and say that your guys's coaching and accounting services have really opened our eyes to what our business is, what it can do. The accounting services that we receive are eh, they're so much better than I've ever experienced in, however many years I've been managing this company. And I think that it's worth saying that it is important that your accounting services understand property management. And that was also a key piece to our success, is not having to explain something in the books to our accounting team. Like,
Yeah.
not like you guys are just in the field and in the thick of it, so like you understand why that check was cut this way or whatever it might be, and that was a big change in our ability to understand our numbers too.
That's great. Yeah, that's really great to hear. I would agree. I would agree. No matter who you use for accounting, they need
Mhm.
to know property management. A generic accountant is a really bad idea when it comes to trust accounting.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah,
Yeah, even a good generic accountant, it's just not the same.
it's not.
Um, okay, cool. Well, Madison, thank you so much for your time. I will let you go. You appear to have a beautiful day ahead of you there in Michigan, so I'll let you get to it.
Awesome. Thanks, Brad. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for hanging out with me.
No problem. Have a good one.